Morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ken Reads, the segment where I take a letter from you that explains your experience dating someone who likely has a severe insecure attachment style and break it down and share my very unfiltered, very raw thoughts and feelings. Now, just as we're getting into this episode, I want to let you know I'm going to be joined today by my colleague, Tawny Lovelace, who I love talking about all these attachment related things with. Tawny will be jumping on in a hot second. Second little announcement. I'm pleased to say that I'm at the final countdown of the September batch of letters, meaning I've only got 2 more after this one, I believe. So at the end of next week, it is my hope to introduce the submissions for October, November. So if you're keen to submit a letter during that time, you're very welcome to, and I will be able to obviously go through the motions of reading these out as I do by myself and with my colleagues. So with that all being said, I will just wait for Tawny to join, and then I will bring well today as we're just getting this all sorted out. Hey Tawny, so good to see you again.
Hi Ken, how are you? Let me get this camera right.
I'm really good. I was actually worried about you when I was hearing about all the hurricanes that are happening in your part of town.
Yeah, luckily I am in Indiana right now, so I am
Good.
not. I've avoided all the hurricanes, but that's so sad, right? Like just to be hit back to back.
It looks insane. It just looks like, it's one disaster after another over there. So my love to anyone who's obviously out there, and I'm glad to hear that you're safe.
Yeah, thank you. I know I've talked to a lot of people that I know that are right there. We just missed it because I was in West Palm, but like some friends and family that live a little bit up north from West Palm Beach have been hit pretty hard. So yeah, I'm glad that everybody I know is safe, and just sending prayers to everybody who isn't.
Yep. And that message goes out to anyone who's there at the moment as well, too. I hope everyone's safe and taking care of themselves in that particular location.
Yeah.
Now, just before we get into this letter from the person I'm going to call May, before we do, Tawny, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. I am a motivational love coach and a certified confidence coach, and I teach women how to let go from relationships like the one we're about to talk about, and definitely get equipped so they can continue on their love life journey, getting equipped so they don't have to put up with this kind of shit or go through this kind of experience again.
I have got a letter that I think you will really, really, really get your teeth sinking into, because I feel like this is one that will, you and I will both appreciate talking about too. So why don't we get started?
Go for it. I'm excited.
All right. So May writes, when my ex and I met, we were instantly attracted to each other. We had a lot of shared interests. We both liked to hike. And despite being in his 30s, he lived with his parents. I respected this. I was aware that there was some tension in his family. He was pursuing a difficult career as a classical musician, following in his father's footsteps. His mother was a highly anxious woman who heavily depended on him and also her partner. Because this was during the pandemic, I didn't meet either of them for months into our relationship. He was a good partner. He made sure that I knew that I was beautiful. We could be silly together, we supported each other's goals, and at one point, he even admitted that this was, quote unquote, the least toxic relationship he'd ever had. The first time he left was about 1 year in. Normal morning, breakfast and a walk in the park. I asked him to plan a trip. He evaded. When we got home, he just said, "I'm sorry," and bolted. I called him an hour later because surely there must have been a misunderstanding. He arrived back at my doorstep looking flustered, and that cycle repeated a few times. Okay, I'm going to just take a pause here and just say, Tawny, what are your thoughts so far on this?
Well, I was hoping you would pause right there for me, because I was just thinking about how it just is, everything's going so good. Everything's so good. And then something like kind of a big deal, right? Like they had that, it was a big deal. And then they just kind of brush it off like it's nothing and kind of make it seem like you're overreacting, is so common with an avoidant, or at least with my experience in being in a relationship with an avoidant. It's like, that was, that was a significant moment we should be discussing, and what, like, where was the miscommunication or what happened. but they often brush that aside because that's that conflict, that's that no accountability. But what are you thinking?
I completely agree. And also, what a hyper reaction. It's like you just want to talk about plans for the future and he can't even be there and he's running away. Like, it's just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, in a more functional relationship, I would like to believe that if you don't want to go on a holiday, plan the next stage of a relationship, you would just say, I'm uncomfortable with this. Can we pause and take a moment to just think about this, not just bolt?
Yeah, another way of like just avoiding having more like in-depth discussions, just another way to kind of like blow it off, breeze by it. And you know what, like everything's going good for like she said, and then all of a sudden nothing. It's so random, isn't it?
It is. And I love the way that May was talking about how, she thought it must have been a misunderstanding because that's what it feels like in the moment, right? It's like, this sense of bewilderment because it comes out of nowhere and you're like, what the fuck? Like, and I think people who typically go into that fawn response will think, oh, did I upset this person? What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Did I potentially say something to trigger this response from the other person? But if you take a look back and even read what was written here, this guy ain't saying anything specific like, I don't want to. You're the problem. He's leaving you with nothing. So it's like, you can easily see how the brain tries to rationalize and be like, what's going on here? And it's like, well, I think the answer is this guy's got problems that he's not disclosing. And, you're left with a lot of missing pieces.
Yeah, you're usually left with trying to connect the dots. Also, kind of like because things have gone so well, because it has felt like a healthier relationship, and even they dating you too, thinking like, man, we have a great healthy relationship. You do try to like, in a way, circle back around and maybe minimize it or question yourself or doubt it because you're like, I mean, I have no reason to think that he would do that intentionally. I have no reason to think that he would just blow me off. So you try to like reason with yourself and make it seem logical. But yeah, I love how she's writing too, because I almost feel like we're right there with her.
I know. And it's so relatable too. And like, it takes me back and I'm like, oh, PTSD alert. But fortunately, I don't feel like, I don't know about you, I don't feel at all emotionally connected to it anymore. Cause I'm like, it's well and truly in the past, but I think it's very easy to still take you there.
Oh yeah. Anytime I read anything like it, listen to any of your stuff, it just quickly reminds me of where I was. But I also have gotten in a really good, healthy habit of realizing how far I've come. You know what I mean? Because I was stuck there for quite some time trying to figure out how to let go, how to make sense of it all. Even when I could make sense, I was trying to make more sense. So yeah, it is now when I things like that, I'm just like, oh, it's almost like I so quickly scroll past things now because I'm just like, I know this. I know how this ends. I know where this goes.
And it's the same damn story, even if the details are slightly different.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? Characters change, like the environment, like the details change a little bit, but it's still the same theme throughout everyone. Like everyone has the same experience, and things do change. There are little pieces that kind of make it yours independently, but for the most part, it's a theme. I can almost finish it. Like, remember when we were talking before? I can almost finish some of those thoughts before they even get there because I'm like, I know where this is going.
It's almost like we're counting down to the moment when the avoidance says, I can't give you what you're looking for. It's like, oh, there it is. It's like playing bingo in advance.
Yeah. Or the self-sabotage comes along like, it's never enough for you. You want too much. And then it's just like, oh, let me back away. And like, yeah, for sure.
I know. One thing I will say that I didn't mention too is I'm a little bit worried about his family dynamic on the basis that it sounds like he's got a overbearing mum who's anxious and she leans a lot on the dad and him. And so already my brain's going, are we in enmeshment territory here? Which I suspect yes. And if he's a struggling musician, as an artist, then he's also putting himself in a very vulnerable position with his mum and also probably his family because he may not have the resources or the means to actually have proper independence from that. And God only knows how that's affecting his brain and also how he relates with people.
Absolutely. And you think about it, like that's what makes it sometimes so understanding. That's how you can be so empathetic at times to them because you're thinking of all these different dynamics, especially if you have more knowledge, like how we have a little more knowledge about a lot of these things. We've been through it. We've but the truth is yeah, those are all reasons that you start to kind of justify it too, though. Like, well, he's got, he's being pulled in different different directions and he's chasing his dreams. So there's so many things you can do to justify their behavior that makes you stay locked in. But yeah, when you were mentioning the family dynamic, I'm like, that would have been a real good clue to kind of step back and kind of observe that dynamic a little bit further so that you could kind of see what the dynamic is so that you know whether or not, or what you're getting yourself into. Because often those questions, whether your family dynamics and being able to observe that, sometimes gives you the clues you needed to, you know, make a wiser decision.
Completely agree. And I know that you're no stranger to the arts and people who are in that space as well too. And I've got to be brutally honest. I mean, I know this because I'm an entrepreneur, but like there are a lot of failing artists who romanticize being in the arts. They romanticize being a musician. They romanticize being an actor and this and that. But they're about as far from that as it gets because that's their comfort zone. They like chasing impossible dreams, but they do not have the courage to go that next step and actually make it a reality.
Yeah, small percentage that do, but you're absolutely right. They fantasize that for a long time. You know what I mean? And it's something they continue to chase, but it also helps them elude getting intimate in other areas of their life because they're constantly, you know, artistic, like, you know, path of achieving that goal. So, yeah.
It's interesting how these attachment things play out in so many areas outside of just romantic relationships too.
Yeah. Just like when I had I was just having a conversation the other day and I said, this is just not romantic. It's like the best friend where I was like devastated we weren't best friends anymore. And I couldn't believe, like, I thought we'd be best friends for life. And then I years later ran into her and she's like, yeah, I've been going to therapy and I'm an avoidant. And I thought, why? I never thought about that. Like I never put the pieces together with family members, friends, all of it. So yeah.
And I think, and I know you've mentioned that story before, but I have to say, like, I actually, when I hear that sort of stuff, and look, good on her for actually going to therapy and realizing that. But I don't know you, I find it validating because it's like, oh, like, you know, it's almost like, thank God.
Well, yeah, because I carried it for a long time ago, which is another reason why I'm so focused on teaching women how to let go through disconnecting and detoxing and detaching. Because even though I felt like I healed from it and I understood and I was like, okay, we're no friends and, you know, my life continued, there is that thought that comes around every so often and you just try to think, does it make any more sense right now? So hearing her say that was very validating. It was like, wow, all those times I had to reflect on all the time I spent really hurt, you know, because I didn't understand at the time. Yeah.
Then when you do, it's sort of like, thank God, I don't have to personalize this anymore too. So I think, look, honestly, the psychoeducation around this really does help. Anyways, let's get back into May's letter. So May continues, 2 years in, I just finished my PhD. I stayed with him in his family's home for a week in between apartments. They didn't like me and said that I was a woman who liked to be taken care of. I confided in him that I was hurt. He tensed and said that he had never been in love with me. He explained the sex was amazing, we had everything in common, and I brought him peace, but it wasn't love. For him, love was too big of a word. I asked him if he'd ever been in love, and he said yes, with women that he hadn't been in long-term relationships with, only those he'd been in fleeting situationships with. He even had the audacity or innocence to admit it. He told me that I needed to be faster about picking shows on Netflix, and then it was over. I'm going to take a pause here. I need to decompress. Do you want to share your thoughts off the back of that?
Through the Netflix, and I was like, hold on, let me catch my breath. Hold on. And then it was just you know, it's while she's saying that he wasn't in like those short-term relationships and all that, I'm thinking to myself, the question I want to ask is, has he ever had his heart broken? That would have been like, besides that information she just, you know, provided us. The other question is, did he ever have his heart broken? Because that's a real good key that maybe he is the avoidant, you know, or he's, you know, definitely in that lane.
100%. And also, I just sort of think his understanding of love just seems so weird to me too. Like the things is like, truly, it is true that there are people out there who just don't like you that much. Like that is very much a thing. But this, like the way he's saying this to you, it just seems like he's coming up with excuses. It's sort of just like, oh, you don't move through Netflix shows fast enough. And, you know, like, oh, we have great sex. You make me feel at peace. But this isn't love. It's like, what are you expecting? For your partner to punch you in the face? For her to, like, you know, throw a chair at you? Is that your definition of love?
She's probably making sense of all this again, taken into, okay, I see the dynamic of his family. Now his family doesn't like me because I'm probably pulling him in this direction. And then they don't have him for this, you know, stability. So there's always those reasons that give you the like the hope of staying sometimes, because you're like, well, he's going through this right now, you know, like he's dealing with this, and now he's bringing this stuff up because, you know, his family's giving him a hard time, and that
Yes.
part of the process too. But it gives you every reason. There's just reasons to make it make sense for you, so that you stay longer, inquire more, and avoid leaving or letting go when you already know and all the signs right there. So yeah.
Do you know, as you were saying that, my brain was starting to do what it used to do back in the day of making excuses. He's going through a tough time. His family doesn't like
Yeah.
me. I must obviously be too needy, and I obviously need to be taken care of. It's so easy to go into that mode of thinking where you're like, it's me. I'm the problem. And it's like, settle down, Dr. Taylor Swift. I don't think it's actually you.
Yeah, I had a shitload of excuses. I'll tell you that. Like I had every time. And the thing was, is because it's such a great relationship, there wasn't a whole bunch to bitch about, you know. But the small things I was taking away or sharing, it was just like I can hear myself making all those excuses again. And then it's circling back to, well, am I being too, like, maybe I want too much. Maybe I'm requiring too much. Maybe it's the way I'm communicating. You know, we start pointing this, you know, the finger at us, because for the most part, they've been great, right? They've had a great, you know, it seems healthy, everything's been going good. But when it starts to go left, it's real easy to fall into that, those excuses, and starting to blame ourselves.
And we've also seen the family say they don't, you know, it appears they don't like you, May, and also you're being told you need a lot of taking care of. That's basically synonymous with you're too needy. So, you know, you're already too much.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting that they're saying this without actually being very explicit about where boundaries are being crossed, which makes me just think, you know, this is a family where, you know, for them, love probably is not about being emotionally vulnerable. It's probably not about proper
Oh, yeah.
caretaking. It's just, you've got emotions? No, you need too much.
Well, it's kind of like I was watching. What was I watching the other night? It was like they were talking about their childhood and growing up, and their parents weren't very they didn't verbalize "I love you," but instead it was like how they took care of them and how they, you know, provided for them, and that was love. And when you think about it, I mean, well, someone mentioned here, well, someone just said, where was it? He confuses entering attachment with losing love. It's also like a lot of times, because we require more of that healthy relationship and they can't provide it, they think we're trying to control them. So there they get that confused too. So it's like they don't equivalent me could sharing something like, hey, I think, you know, we should talk this out, or like, here's how I think it should go. You just voicing or expressing your emotions, your feelings, or, you know, what you're thinking to solve something, and all of a sudden it's like you're controlling them. There's so many different dynamics that you can play into this, right?
Oh, God, yeah. And it's just, you know, a lot of it is just hypervigilance from the avoidance part, where they're, you know, thinking that any attempt you have to try and create connection, interdependence is, no, you want too much from me. I can't give you what you need. You're trying to control me. I will admit, I think this guy in particular doesn't seem like a dismissive to me. He seems more like a fearful avoidant to me, because there's too much stuff going on here, which feels like there's a lot of, how do I put it? It doesn't seem like he has the aloofness of a dismissive avoidant. He has more of that airy, fairy, romantic, fearful avoidant vibe going on.
I would agree. Yeah. Like he probably fantasizes about that love, can't quite show up as that person. And so therefore he has that avoidant. Yeah, for sure. I don't think it's as dismissive compared to as fearful. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. So we continue with May, where she writes, oh, she writes, 2 weeks later, my mother unexpectedly died. I was in a haze of compounded grief, so when he came back months later, I let him. He was apologetic and claimed that even if he didn't say, I love you, that he showed it to me. We moved back in together. He was working through his blocks, as he referred to them. My spirit was worn down, but I was hopeful. But it happened again. We were together for 3 years in total. He started dating immediately. He even went to my old yoga studio and asked out my teacher. He wants me to be friends with me, but says that we're just incompatible as partners, which is mind-boggling given how long he stayed, appearing content. All right. Just like it's like every cycle comes with, you know, just new stuff that's going on. And I want to first off say, May, I'm so sorry to hear that your mum passed away. And I can understand why you let him back in, because when we're vulnerable and lonely, that is our most dangerous period, when we let these people back in.
Yeah. And in such a vulnerable space, you're going to look to whatever's familiar, whatever adds comfort for you. So if that was it, you know, and I find that like more fearful avoidance return than dismissive. Not saying
Yes.
fine. That's one thing, like at least with my clients and myself, that stands out. More fearful clients return, and the dismissive, some do return, but most of them do not. They're done. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about you, like I find as you work in this space and you actually see the way this plays out, it actually becomes a lot easier to be like dismissive,
Yeah.
fearful. And even though, as we said before, like, even if there are differences, like one is boomeranging, the other one isn't, one is a dismissive, the other one's a fearful, it's still the same thing because it's always whenever you get closer and intimate, that's when the excuses come up. They're shutting down, they're breaking up. So
And I,
at the end of the day,
yeah, and I like to think of it like this. It doesn't really matter, in my opinion, at least to me anymore.
same.
It doesn't matter if it's dismissive or fearful. It's still avoidant. So at the end of the day, the avoidant part is the part that that we're dealing with the mostly, right? Because they're avoiding all those things. So it doesn't really matter if they show up in a dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant, whatever. But for me, it's just, yeah, the avoidant part sticks out, and it's just going to be that cycle that continues regardless of which area they fall into.
I agree. Although I will say one thing though, and I don't know if you've had this experience with your clients, I think those that boomerang and recycle and keep coming back and over again are much harder to cut it
Oh,
because it's so
oh yeah,
addictive.
for sure. It's no less. It's no more addictive than like the on and off relationships. There's something there that keeps you going. It's a cycle, whether it's a cycle of toxicity, familiarity, comfort, whatever it is. Oh, absolutely. I see that a lot more too with the fearful. Yeah.
Because I think that also the fearfuls, because of the way they get so love bombing, particularly in the beginning of dating. I mean, dismissives can do this too, but I feel like fearfuls often present with a lot more empathy. They seem more self-aware at times and they sound like they're working on their therapy and stuff like this. But when I think what's really jarring about fearfuls is the way in which they very almost violently cut things off, back away, return, act like nothing's really bothered them. And you go through almost like a form of nonverbal gaslighting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I also think like with dismissive, it's more of I could see those, even in my relationship and even after, I remember like rereading, like, am I sure he was dismissive or was he fearful? And I'd go back and forth, but it's very clear cut, like you said, once you start really understanding, you work with so many people, but the dismissive, I could see those. I find it, especially with my clients, we find it harder with dismissive, like the signs were there with the dismissive, I mean, like little things, like the lack of empathy, like even during a TV show or like conversations, it's very black and white for a lot of dismissives, probably because they're very on and off, very, shut down immediately. Like, so that was always there now looking back. Whereas the fearful shows up a little more empathetic, I think.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So it's a little bit, yeah, can be blurry sometimes, but looking back, yeah, I think me and my clients, we've definitely been able to define the dismissive from the fearful.
Yeah. And it's obviously a sign that you and I both obviously have had enough experience with this where it's just like, oh, here we go again. It's, it's the same old story.
Yeah.
And
And the heartbreak, you know what I mean? The devastation and the heartbreak that we all feel, that doesn't change. You know what I mean? We can read a ton of these, and besides that, the theme being so, like we know the theme and we know what's about to happen, it's almost predictable. The sad part is that the devastation, we're all experiencing the same devastation, the level of devastation and trying to process that. And so that's what's, makes me, I'm sure you too, we just the drive to want to help people better understand and make sure that they don't, it doesn't happen again. Because even like me, I was just having this conversation the other day, even as a love coach, those were things I should have known. Like I was learning attachment style, more so in the middle of beginning to be a coach, but some of those red flags I should have seen. And I just had those excuses and excused them and saw the good parts and how great the relationship was. But yeah, I mean, you got to show yourself compassion at the same time, be compassionate through all of this, because I think the theme through all of these are people start saying, what should I have known? Was I doubting myself? Like it's made them kind of question their intuition. So just show yourself compassion. I just want to remind everybody, show yourself compassion, because even someone as skilled as me and Ken found ourselves in situations like this. It can happen to anybody.
I was still finding myself in these situations, even as early as last year. It's like, this is an ongoing journey to unlearn a lot of that stuff. Like, I mean, we'll talk maybe about this at the end, but I will say a thought for later is, the journey to unlearning and becoming more compassionate is a lifelong journey. And, it's one of those things where just because we're in the field doesn't mean we're not susceptible to it.
Yep, yep. And I'm reading someone said you can tell it was an FA because they usually have a new connection soon after. They just can't be alone. And I while I agree with that, I don't think that determines whether they're fearful or dismissive, because a dismissive is very likely to get validation through cheating and through other things and having that new connection because that's what they're looking for, that surface level where they're not required to show up, or give more. So I think it happens on both sides.
It can. I think the frequency of it might indicate more of a sex addiction thing, and I'd say fearful avoidance are more likely to be a sex addict because I find they have more hardcore addictions.
Now I can see that because the dismissive is also going to cut that off very quickly if that person becomes, you know, not enmeshed with them, but like wanting to dive in deeper, get more intimate. So yeah, they will cut that off and stay lonely and alone for a long time. Whereas the fearful doesn't want to be alone. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But I think the distinction you made was also relevant as well too. So May continues. He was saying he was always going the distance with me with things that weren't everyday relationship things like helping me move. According to him, I never showed him love. The last time I saw him, he asked if we were going back to his place to have sex. He says he'll always be turned on by me, that I can say no until I learn how to He says that I need to learn how to compartmentalize my emotions like him. I said no, but I'm still overwhelmed with rage and I struggle with the memories, feeling like he has rewritten our relationship and recast me as a villain. Well, that is exactly what he has done. That's the end of May's letter, but I just want to round up by saying that's what they do. Like, particularly fearful avoidance, they are very, like the severe ones we're talking about, because they have such a distorted sense of reality and they hate shame. They hate any adverse emotions. They constantly have to change the narrative in their head to make them feel okay with everything. Even look at the last paragraph that I was saying. He was saying at the end, you need to learn to compartmentalize your emotions like me. You never showed me love, but I love sleeping with you and I love being with you. It's like, huh? Like, the story keeps fucking shifting depending on how he feels.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's just like, I just lost my thought. Darn it.
It'll come back.
It's okay. My daughter's trying to, I'm like right here filming and like someone's trying to come in, my daughter's trying to come in. I'm seeing a text like, can I come in? I'm like, not really.
No family
Anyway,
today.
yeah, I thought I had it myself, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I think what's really dangerous about this is the fact that it's like these individuals are changing their narrative on the dime based on how they're feeling about themselves. And and we don't do this intentionally, but when we surrender our reality, our wants, our needs to these people and their interpretation of things, then we start making excuses for their behavior. We become confused because we've become so blended with their confusion as well, too. I mean, it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, it is. And it's a cycle. If you don't get out of it, you're going to stay stuck in it, because I know some of my clients who just have not been able to, get even, they're still trying to make sense of it after all this time. You know what I mean? So at some point during all of this, you have to be able to commit to deciding you're done. Like you've learned enough, you've soaked in enough information, you've made as much sense as you can. I also want to go back to the narrative. It's always interesting how the narrative with the avoidance always is so, like, I remember someone once told me that, like, my ex was saying something like, someone questioned about the breakup, and it was like, oh no, like they just didn't give me any information. It's like, nope, she's back in Indiana. And the people were like, what does that mean? What happened? And she's like, no, I don't know what. Like there was nothing, no substance, like whatever the narrative was, it wasn't going to be the truth. That's for sure.
It's really weird too, because they may even go back and say, oh, May, Tawny, Ken, they were amazing, but we just weren't compatible. It's like, is that really the full story of what happened? And I've said this in a few lives. I've had some fearful avoidance as clients and mates where they'll talk about these fleeting, intense relationships with minimal descriptors, saying things like, oh yeah, we got together and, we just weren't compatible. But then they start to cry. And it's like,
Yeah.
are you sure about that? Like, to me, the way you talk, like the fact that you're still having these big emotions for someone who wasn't compatible for you makes me think there's more to the story here.
Yeah, and I try to think of it like I just, now I tell myself, that's fine. Like, you want to make sure when you first, it's like you want everyone to know the truth, right? Because you want to express it. But the truth is when I reflect now 3 years later, I reflect back, I'm just like, if that's what he had to share to get through that moment, and maybe like I will change that serves you. Maybe that's the narrative that served him. So, I just let that be, you know, and really just, I guess, own and like hone in on my own truth, you know, and knowing better.
I could not agree more. I really think that's literally it. It's like at the end of the day, we've got to make our own truth, but I prefer the truth to align with reality. And I find that people with an insecure attachment have a tendency, and this includes anxiously attached people, there is a tendency for people with insecure attachment at times not to be able to sit with reality. And it doesn't mean you're delusional and think like in these dynamics, right? Like it'd be very easy to say, this guy, for instance, he's just not that into you. Or if he wanted to, he would. And it's like, I don't think either of those descriptors really match what's going on here.
Yeah. And you know, that's funny that you said if he wanted to, he would. I used to do, there's a couple of my videos that were about that. Like, you know, if he wanted to, he would, he could have, but he didn't. And, you know, I mean, at a time in my life where that's what I felt. But after I started to heal and kind of, you know, switch the narrative to serve me, I understand now that, you know what, like when I think back to that relationship, I look at it like this. I'm a gallon, he's a pint. He was giving me everything he could. And he just wasn't ever going to be able to fill that gallon. And then I'm sure with me overpouring him, you know, from my gallon into his pint, he was being overwhelmed with a load of emotions. And so while I, you know, try to have some empathy towards that relationship, I just understand now that it was just, you know, it wasn't going to align in either way. Like it's never going to, I mean, it just doesn't work. It's not to say I'm superior because I'm a gallon. It just means he was giving me all that he could. So maybe he really did want to, Ken. He just wasn't capable of doing that because he was a pint. You know what I mean? He was never going to be able to fill that gallon in me, you know, for me.
Correct. I'm going to go back to that word you just used, capable. And I think, and that's a really important word to go back to, of capacity too. I know I saw a video a while ago where someone was trying to say, oh, the reasons avoidants are hated is because they have capacity issues. I'm like, their capacity issues are not the reason they're hated. The reason they're hated is because they're misleading. Like if they were open about their capacity issues and they were clear about it,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have these problems.
Yeah.
But many of them have very strong defensive mechanisms, including lying. So that's why we're in these messes in the first place.
Yeah, that defense mechanism for sure. Because the truth is just like you said, had someone shared, and there are, you know, I have worked with some clients that have, you know, some men who have said, you know, that's where I'm at right now. Like I'm able to communicate to them that I'm just not capable. And I'm like, if that's what we've gotten from this training, that's wonderful, because they do tend to shut down when we need to go just a little bit deeper to keep, you know, evolving. But yeah, you could respect it if they would just share that. That's, you know, for anyone who's watching or comes across this video, hopefully they will take that into consideration. Just voice the you know, just share that you're not able to do so, you know, because that's the part, it's the misleading part. And it's almost like if they're misleading, that's why I always used to tell you I felt set up. If they're misleading during that time, then it's like, did you fake just being so wonderful and healthy those first 2-3 years? Like, it's like it's hard to make sense out of it, because it's like, that was that fake then? Because you weren't really, you're not being open now. So how could you, you know what I mean? It doesn't align. So it is confusing.
I completely agree with you. And I think too, what's really problematic about this sort of behavior is the fact that it's like, you know, they give everything in those early handful of dates, weeks, months, years. And it's just like, it's full on. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's lovely, but it's full on. And for people who, as I was saying in my video earlier before this one today, is if you're someone who's experienced emotional neglect, chances are, or even mildly secure in your attachment, you are going to be taken for a ride, and you're going to think, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the one. This is perfect. And it's not to say that any of that is fake, but it's misleading, because it's not being honest and authentic with the fact that it's like they keep over giving and then they freak out because they think I've got to somehow do more. And it's like, but you know, none of us were asking for more from you in the first place. You've made assumptions about what we want. You over delivered and under promised big time.
Yeah.
That's deceptive and misleading.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone said the honeymoon phase can actually last for years. Actually, yeah.
Yes.
Honeymoon going on almost 6 years, and our relation, I think it lasted maybe 2-3 years. I mean, it was fantastic. We even solved, you know, challenges and conflict. We still managed to get to that. But the more we got evolved, the more I evolved, the more, you know, bringing everything up from within, like deep down, they'd suppressed. We got to get past this, you know. Then we kept running into that block, you know, nothing got solved. We kept running into that same challenge, that same cycle, the same conversation. And that was, you know, the indication that, okay, the honeymoon phase is over. We're not making any real, you know, having any real growth here. But yeah, I think it can last at different times for different people, you know,
For
almost
sure.
hate you for. Because I mean, honestly, it's almost like they don't want to sway the boat. So they just kind of show up and appease you almost. It's almost like a people pleaser. But again, they can show up like confident. So you're not looking at it as a people pleaser. You're looking at it like, well, he loves me and, you know, he wants to show up this way for me. So,
Yep.
mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think the thing is, because we're not really privy to what they're thinking and feeling, we're only seeing the way they behave and talk every now and then too. And the stuff they're sharing, like when, you know, a fearful avoidant or a dismissive avoidant is starting to shut down, it obviously varies from person to person, but like, okay, a stonewalling, you know, walking ahead of your partner, feeling moody and irritable. And they might literally just say, I am fine, when they're not fine. And it's just like, what am I
Yeah.
supposed to do with that information? Like, you know, what am I supposed to do? And I think a lot of people who personalize it, I get it, learn not to do that. But like when people start personalizing, thinking, is it about me? Is it about the relationship? Is it blah, blah, blah? It's all this sort of stuff. It's like, you know, you who are on the receiving end of this are not privy to the tumultuous emotional stuff that's going on inside of your partner, where they are deciding the fate of the relationship without you. And a lot of the time you're feeling like we're still fine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think back now, it's like, I almost feel like there were times in conversations that and I've said this before, I swear he wanted me to break up so he didn't have to be the bad guy. I could see that process happening, just the things that were occurring on the outside. And I remember thinking, does he want me to break up with him? Because he's not going to. Because if he does, he'll be the bad guy. That'll be more shame. Then it'll be like this. But it was just like, yeah, there were so many times I thought that. So, but yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. But in the reflection part of it, I'm like, I almost see those wheels spinning in his head where he's like, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. So maybe it'll end, you know, from silent treatment to just being like, oh, you know, I'm not enough. And the self-sabotage that comes with some of that behavior too, you know, and then it reflects back on you again. You kind of find yourself in that circle again. Like, is it me? It's it's mind boggling. It really is when I think back to it. I mean, I have a lot more clarity now and I can process it, thank goodness. But in the midst of all that, Ken, that was heavy stuff.
It's so discombobulating because when you're in the midst of it and you're in love with this person, you know, do you want to be told like, oh, by the way, we think your partner is self-sabotaging this relationship. We think that, you know, this is going to end terribly. But, you know, actually, this is a good question to ask you because I often say this on my behalf. In your experience, Tawny, if you're hearing these stories, have you ever heard many success stories with these severely avoidantly attached people with their partner? Because I have a very firm answer, and it's not based on bias; it's based on evidence. I'm keen to hear your answer on this.
Yeah, I'm glad that you preceded that with evidence. Yes, because I just did a video. I already posted a video on YouTube, and someone was like, "Avoidance do work on themselves," and I was like, "Whoa!" Like apparently, like hold on, I didn't say they didn't, but let's be real. The amount of pain that they have endured or that they're carrying is so suppressed that for me, in knowing just from all the experiences, everyone I've worked with, speaking to other coaches just like yourself, no, it's just there would have to. That's why when I said it was a deal breaker, it's not like I want to be like, oh, it's a deal breaker because not that we can't work on this. I know the amount of work that it would have to take, and it would be chopped because I can only imagine. Okay, they're okay to go to counseling or therapy. And then when it gets too deep, whoop, they're done. They don't want to do counseling. And then again, and I've seen it with my clients, they get to a certain point and they're starting to realize, and I'm like, oh, if you just hold on with me, if you just go on this journey with me, and they can't. Like we've hit that point, and then it's almost like I hear them deflate. Like they've been inflated this whole time, and then right when we get ready to like we're gonna hit that point where if we cross over this bridge, Ken, there could be a breakthrough. Not that you're going to be ready, or I'd even, want to date someone like that, but you're going to be into another zone where this could work, for you. And they deflate and just kind of go back to like, nope, because they feel like that shame and that all that we've talked about. But no, absolutely not. Like I haven't actually met anybody, none of my clients, none of myself, professionally, personally. No, it's just, yeah.
That's my answer as well too. Like, sorry guys, there's no hope. Like, I'm being blunt. Like, there is no hope unless, key phrase, they are also working on their stuff. Not just reading about attachment theory, not just going to a handful of therapy sessions and doing acupuncture on the side. They have to be working on their attachment style. And that is the hardest thing of all. Like, they just, you know, it's so hard for them to work on it. Someone here's asked, nobody. No, not every avoidant attacher is like this. We're talking the severe end. Like, you know, and the severe cases are the ones that are the most common in the dating coach circles because they're the ones that are the most problematic. So generally speaking, we see plenty of avoidant attachers, mild to moderate, who are actually working on their stuff for sure. But, you know, when I hear, you know, like, I've said this before in a previous life, when I hear people like Ricky Cluse on Anxious Hearts Guide saying things like, oh, you know, you just need to give your avoidant partner space. I'm like, no, you fucking don't. Like, they need to be learning how to communicate what they need from us.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts seeing, you know, that kind of stuff being promoted on social media. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I was madly in love with my previous, you know, one of my previous relationships. I was madly in love, and the thing was, I was willing to do whatever it took. Ken, I researched it, I approached it this way, I changed my. And as a love coach, I did have more skills than maybe the average person, and I even resourced them out even further so that I could, you know, maybe get the dynamics to change. But one thing you said is, unless they are willing, and even if they're willing, it's going to be a long road. And I don't want to sign up for that long road. And I also don't want to discourage anybody that's avoidant that wants to do the work, right? But in my own personal experience, I know I have clarity on what I want, what I'm capable of, what I'm willing and ready to do. And I've got to have someone that matches that. And when they said nobody, no, because I do know, actually, I have a couple I work with. She's anxious, he's avoidant. It works. But is it filled with some toxic traits and some toxic, you know, things in their dynamics? Absolutely. Are they going to have that healthy relationship they're both dying to have? No. Are they willing to settle for that?
Yes.
If that works for them, go for it. Yes, I'm not against it. I'll give you the tools and you guys can do what you need to. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about, like you said, a severe avoidant or someone who has not addressed their trauma and is not willing to, you know, open the door to that and leave the door open during that path, no matter how long it is, then yeah, no, I don't know anyone, you know?
I'm the same. Similar example. I've got an avoidant client. She's in a relationship with a mega anxiously attached person. And, you know, honestly, it sounds like hell. Not the kind of relationship I want to be a part of. But I do the best I can to support them with what they're going through. And, you know, I wish them all the best. And I think they're doing fabulous work of educating themselves on it.
I agree.
But it's their comfort zone. It's what they want. It's what they want to have for themselves. Fantastic. It ain't the kind of relationship I'm looking for.
And I think that's what it breaks. A lot of us, you know, and a lot of my clients I work with, and just people in general, they don't have real clarity on what is a deal breaker, what their must-haves are, what their core values are, where they haven't really dived, you know, deep enough to understand and have that clarity. And I think you and I have. We've had the experiences. We get more experiences. We expand that with our client experiences. And I think it's just knowing, like, when you have that clarity and that education, you know what works for you. And if that works for them, not everybody, it's kind of like coaching. Not everybody wants to heal. Not everybody wants to do the work. It's freaking, they're already on autopilot. There's a lot on their plate already. They're already dealing with the world and life in general. So it's understandable that some people just don't want to open that door, right? And go down that road. But just know that talking about is just know whether or not you want to. Me, I'm not settling for average. I'm not looking for average. I'm looking for something extraordinarily rare, and I want to be my healthiest self. So I know that I want someone who's doing the same kind of work and, you know, matches my energy.
I completely agree. And I think, you know, I love what you've said so much, because personally, I've got nothing against people who want to have different kinds of relationships. More power to you. And it's like what someone said, it's at the place where we're at, you know, when we start a relationship, absolutely, 100%. But the cases that Tawny and I often deal with are so lopsided. We've got one person who's more emotionally mature than the other person, and they're playing different games of tennis with one another, and it's just not batting at the same league. And it's like, look, not to sound elitist, but a lot of you who are listening to this are actually at a far different level to those of the people that you're choosing to date with. Let the people you're dating date more of the same. That's their comfort zone. More power to them. Great. But if you, and not everyone actually has flexibility and the capacity to change. Like, I'm sorry, it's just the way that it is. And, you know, for some people, they go to therapy because they want to just talk about their stuff, but they're not actually there to connect with their feelings because it's too hard for them. That's why, even though I love talk therapy as a way to build rapport, that will never be enough to work on the deep underlying stuff. And unfortunately, whether it be astrology, zodiacs, who knows what that's guiding this, there are a lot of people who are never going to get better. And you've got to have radical acceptance of the fact that that is just the way it is. And I see one trait, I've done this plenty of times, we've got to stop looking for the best in people, because frankly, a lot of the time we're projecting our good qualities onto others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to be, well, that's why it's so important to show up authentically as yourself, but how many people don't, because they've always been a people pleaser, or they experiences or have been conditioned not to. That's why it's so important to look inward and really get clarity on what you want, because a lot of times when we're dealing with these avoidant attachment styles and relationships, and we're trying to make sense of it, if you would just take all the energy, I look at it now, all the energy I used to scroll and gain all that knowledge, yes, it served me, right, to a certain extent. But at what point did I turn the mirror and go, Tawny, at what point are you going to say, okay, that's enough. Like, it's time for you to take that same energy, and what can you do to prepare yourself and equip yourself so you can release that and keep going. And so you're not getting caught up in like 500 podcasts and 500 different messages and listening to that person and that person. So I think it's really important that, like, we often question, how long have I spent trying to make sense of all this? And I know that everybody else has everybody has a timeline, and maybe some people absorb quicker and other people don't, but it's important to ask yourself, how long have you been spending on this particular area of trying to understand? Are you getting it? Are you not receiving it? Are you absorbing it? Have you had enough? Like, understand where you're at and ask yourself, is it time to kind of move forward? You know what I mean? Because you can get really caught up in all of this, in these conversations. It's hard. I feel like this is one topic and one type of relationship where we can all dive in. We can get stuck because it's so fascinating how it works.
Look, it's beautifully fascinating. Like, I honestly find it is the topic that keeps on giving, because avoidant attachers themselves often present themselves like a mystery box. They don't want anyone to get to know them. They want to present themselves in a very aloof, mysterious way. And so naturally, I think a lot of us are trying to peel behind the layer, the onion, so to speak, because they certainly don't want to. And so we're just coming up with our best conclusions as to what's going on, in combination, obviously, with a lot of good hardcore evidence and information that we have. But you're right. And I've been lately doing videos, directed at the people who are dating avoidant attachers frequently, because at the end of the day, I'll be the first to put my hand up and say, I got to a point where I had to take ownership for my own side of the street. I was continuing to choose these people, and I had to be like, enough. Like, this is me now. Yes, the dating pool's got plenty of people with insecure attachment, but if I, I'm going to complain about that, I'm taking my own agency out of this. And so what can I do to change my energy and how I show up? And I got to tell you, when you start to heal that, you are not going to be primed, eagerly swiping on people who are obviously avoidantly attached. Like, I mean, when you recognize this stuff, you can pick them from a mile away. You're like, oh yeah, there we go. Mummy issues, daddy issues, someone who's obviously got tons of trauma that's on their sleeve. No thanks. It's just no longer attractive. You're healing when that is no longer your type.
Yeah. I love that part. And I think we got to remind that it seems like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, everyone always asks me, like, well, how do you let go? Well, I teach people how to, disconnect and detox and detach from their action past and all that. But people still want to know, like, how do I let go? But how do I, like, make sure I don't find myself in the same situation? And it's simply evolving, gathering the knowledge from Ken, listening to, gathering the knowledge you can, and then finally getting to a point and applying it, implement it. Because the truth is when you grow or you evolve, yeah, they're not the same. Like, you're not attracted to the same person. And on top of that, it's like, me and my ex, for instance, we were friends for like 20 some years. We were together for 6 years. And the truth is if we were to run into each other again, you know how it is, like when you run into an old friend and you're like, oh, hey, and everything, I'd be someone completely different. This whole experience has changed me. And because I've evolved, I'm not going to be that same person ever. I wouldn't even show up as that person anymore. And so when I move forward, I'm attracted to is much different. And it is very clear to see, you're right. It's hard not to like self-diagnose or diagnose people like, oh, that's this and this and that. But it's clear when you're talking to people in conversations, because we're so observant and because this is our field, it's easy to pick up on patterns and keywords and things and behaviors. So yeah, and it makes it helpful because we know how to avoid getting in this situation again. Because I definitely know what questions to ask and what to observe and to understand whether or not that's going to fall. Because a lot of people, you know, they want to know, it was perfect in the beginning. Remember, it was lovely in the beginning. So how would we know? I have people, a lot of girls, a lot of women will say, well, if I'm going on a date now and it's great, I kind of ask myself, how do I know he's not going to be an avoidant? Like in a year, I'm going to find out this was all, you know, he is. But when you have that knowledge and you implement it and you're using that wisdom, you can make wiser decisions, and you will be able to understand, and you will be able to tell, and you won't find yourself in that situation.
And if you do, which happens unfortunately more often than I care to count, because often a lot of people do have a recurring pattern, great news. You probably have something that's replicating this situation because of an experience of childhood, of something else. And that's wonderful in a way, because even though obviously you don't want this, you know, if you have an inner child, for instance, that is still desperately wanting to get approval from emotionally unavailable people, wonderful. There is an opportunity to heal that beautiful part of yourself and actually go through a reparenting process. Because I've been doing that for the last couple of years now, and I have to tell you, like, I mean, I am noticing the changes like night and day. It's a slow, subtle process, but the good news is that change is possible. And as Tawny said, the knowledge, the psychoeducation piece, in fucking valuable, like really, really good. But at the end of the day, Tawny and I can spell out all the signs of avoidant attachment. We can tell you how they talk, how they shop. I can spot them from a mile away, from people like Matthew Hussey to just like a bunch of individuals where it's just like they're fucking avoidant, and it's clear as day. But until you learn that that is no longer your type, there's no like, this is pointless.
Well, yeah. I just saw a comment that avoidants are mysterious and complex, and that's super sexy to many of us. And that would be the key, that maybe you need, like, it's time to take a step back and kind of evaluate and understand, why is that sexy to you? Because I don't know about you, but like, if I'm looking for a healthy relationship with the kind of man I'm looking for is intentional, mysterious probably isn't going to be in that same equation. Mysterious, as sexy as like when you're first dating, it means, you know, don't share everything, make sure they're worth, you know, sharing your most intimate stories with, and so forth. And some mystery, you know, leave early and don't, you know, overdo the date or talk too much, leave a little bit of mystery. But if I'm looking for something intentional, mysterious is not in that same equation for me, because it's not sexy to me. What it screams is heartbreak, and watch out, because this person is not in tune emotionally. And if I am, that's not going to be a match, and it's going to be a struggle for me to get what I need from a relationship. So yeah, it's very interesting, but I'm sure some people do find that super sexy. There's lots of women who like that challenge, and lots of people who like that challenge because it seems like a challenge. They want to be that safe space, but the truth is you're dealing with someone that nothing's ever probably felt safe, and there's not much you can do to make them feel safer.
Agreed. And I'm sure for plenty of straight men too, like, you know, when you're chasing a girl who, you know, appears like, you know, a dream, you know, she's effervescent, bubbly, and very full of life, you know, of course, it's like you've hit the jackpot. Oh my God, I feel like I found someone who makes me feel like I'm worthy. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, when the hot and cold behavior starts, you feel emasculated. You feel like I feel like I'm a woman in a heterosexual relationship, even though I'm the guy. And, you know, it's one of those things where I think a lot of us need to transition from fantasy in our types. I get, like, again, I agree with you. Like, I love dark and edgy. Like, guys that are, you know, dark and edgy, totally understand that. But that's a phase. Yeah. Please leave. Because it's like food. As good as it is to sometimes go to fast food, a diet of that is going to kill you.
Yeah. Not healthy. Tastes good for a minute, and then you're like, oh, I should never did that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But it was a good experience for a little bit.
For a little bit. Yeah, I get it. This is Ken. Whenever we have, I wanted to tell you before we, like, getting off subject kind of, but I wanted to share with you, you know, I love anytime we do a live. It's so powerful. Our energies connect. And I just thought about how often we've done them all the way back. I don't know how long we've known each other, but we've been doing lives for a minute, not just on the avoidance, but like red flags. And we talked about so many different things, but I just love that we can always come full circle and provide this to, you know, your followers, my followers, and so forth. So just thank you for always connecting, sharing your knowledge, because one thing's for sure, anybody who follows my page, if you're not following Ken is the one who knows so much. Ooh, careful, baby. I got another one coming in the house. Hi, baby. I'm filming for work. Okay, so yeah, just it's been a joy. And anybody who doesn't follow Ken already, Ken is full of resources and has so much information. I just love that you do this all the time, Ken. You've provided so much.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that, Tawny. Thank you very much. I love our lives too because it's so easy to connect with you about these topics. Like, I mean, I'll never forget the one we did last year or early
Yeah,
this year.
sure.
Yeah, because that was, oh my God, that was cathartic on so many levels. And I think it's wonderful that you're also a fellow professional who's been through this as well too, because I think that it's, well, I don't know if you saw this, the other day I had a go at a lot of the Get Your Ex Back coaches because it's so easy to see, you
Yeah.
know, on social media and other places, people who are very predatory, who are taking advantage of individuals who are in these dynamics. Hell, the tarot readers have been getting millions out of this each year. And it's just like, it's just the same story. And if people don't understand the dynamic that they're in, they're setting themselves up to be taken advantage of as well too, by clowns.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, we all question at some point in our life, you know, how do I get my ex back and all that, whether we were young and we asked or we find ourselves older and coming across that. But the truth is the real question is not what can I do to get my ex back? Why are you wanting to get
Yeah.
your ex back? That should like reflect and turn, and the question becomes yours to own and answer. So yeah, it's disturbing, but you know, that's how social media is. And hopefully if you find yourself confused, you know, gain clarity by finding some real resources that are credible. But that's why I love your page, because the fact is I mean, I know about avoidant experiences because I've had it personally. I work with, you know, clients that do that, but you're on a different spectrum. You're diving in and helping us connect the dots. And that's so helpful when you're trying to go through the actual breakup or resolve or like, you know, recover. You want to understand how this happened and help it make sense. And you do that. So I appreciate that. Yeah. On the other hand, myself, I can help you and explain and connect some dots, but I told you before, I'm at the point where it's like, no, I've had enough. I understand enough. I understand I'm not dealing with that again, and I want to prepare myself so it never happens again. So I need to learn how to, you know, let go, and I need to learn how to get equipped so I can continue on my love life journey. So yeah, we're on two different spectrums, but I love that, and I think that's what makes it so great that we work together.
I completely agree, and I love your energy with this too, because, you know, I was actually thinking about this today. I think there are phases to this journey off the back of a breakup with an avoidant attacher, as I think you would agree, in that initially, I think it's really important to radically accept you're not responsible for this person's bad behavior. Like,
Right.
much of it was not your fault. And it's really important to work off the back of that breakup. And as you and I said in that really good live, you know, it's devastating, and it takes a lot of intentional time processing to get your head and your heart clear off the back of that, and that'll take as long as it wants to take.
Yeah.
But eventually you get to what I call phase 2, which is when you start to get to a place of being like, how did this happen? Why did I allow this person into my life? And you start to then hopefully get into a shift where you're like, okay, I'm noticing some traits about myself that may have led to this experience. I'd like to hope that it was a freak experience at first, but I'm led to believe that maybe there was actually something that maybe I brought to the table as well too that I need to be aware of. Big one usually for a lot of people, boundaries, and a lot of things that need to be learned off the back of that too. And then I find people get to phase 3, which is when you start to work on how do these dynamics make us feel? Unworthy, not chosen, not good enough, pent up rage. And really at that point, and a lot of people may not be there yet, so it's okay if you don't agree with what I'm about to say, but you will get to a point where you're like, the avoidant actually wasn't the real issue. They pressed them buttons that were there since way long ago that I now need to take accountability and responsibility so that this never, ever happens again in my dating and relationship life. And all of that, like, even though I've truncated into phases, like, I mean, you know, often people, when they're going from like this phase of like being like, it's not my fault, they actually need to go into phase 2 where they're like, do I have some other avoidant people in my life that I need to also think about as well too? Because often the answer is you do. And you've often unintentionally enabled or allowed a lot of these individuals to be in your life. and you may actually start looking for more substantial,
Yeah.
meaningful relationships. And well, the reason I love your content is because I find that you're very blunt and efficient in being like, where we're going now
Yeah.
is we're learning to get the love we want and actually define that. And we're not here to, as we say in very rural parts of Australia, we're not here to fuck spiders, meaning we're not here to waste
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, we were not. Well, after you go through a relationship like this, you're not here to waste time anymore. Like, I don't want to waste any more time, and a lot of us are older. Like, I'll be 48 next month. Like, come on. Like, I don't. I mean, I know I got a whole lot of life ahead of me, but I'm like, I don't want to waste any more time on things that don't align for me. And I am like, I'm at a point where it's like, we can have what we want. You know what I mean? It's where it stems from is in here. And that's what we're doing. We're transforming in here, and we're getting the tools we need to release things, let go of things, detach from things that hold us back, whether it's, love block, limiting beliefs, relationships like this. Why do I keep dating the emotionally unavailable person? It's really just gathering that, all the information we need and implementing it and getting clarity and confidence to go out there and get what you want. So yeah, it's not, yeah, definitely. No, what'd you say? Spiders? Yeah. We're not wasting. We gotta go.
Exactly. Just out of respect to your time, how much more time do you have before we need to round this out?
Probably soon. My little one just came in and I think she needs to talk. So I went as a grandmother, I got to take that and do multiple things around here. But yeah, I do want to tend to her needs too. I'm glad we connected tonight. I've loved our conversation.
Likewise. I love chatting with you, Tawny. So thank you so much for being here for this letter reading too. And I'd love to have you back on for future ones as well too, because, and also thank you to May for submitting this letter as well too. And I'm very sorry again for what you've been through because, we know what it's like. We watch these stories play out vicariously through our clients every work day that we have something like this happen. You're not alone. And we are very sorry that you've gone through this too. So I'm very happy to round out here, given the fact that you've probably got to run off and do good old family stuff. So with that being said, as always, Tawny, if people want to find you, work with you, where can they go to do either of those things?
Yeah, so all my social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, it's Tawny Loveless, just like it's spelled here, or it's probably, tagged here or under Ken's page. But yeah, you can hit me up, DM me. Information is on there as far as programs, and you got your link tree that says everything. But yeah, Tawny Loveless, feel free to reach out. I'm glad that you had me. I love to support everybody. And to May, sending loads of comfort and strength your way, and anybody else going through this, because we definitely know how devastating it can be. And hopefully you can get to a point where me and Ken are, where we're like, you know what, we're past that hump and that block and that obstacle, and now we have open space for the love we want, and we know we're working on how to attract that even more and so forth. So yeah, Tawny Loveless, any of my social media.
Thank you very much, Tawny, as always. I'm confident we'll be back again very soon, talking about more of this sort of stuff. Hell, maybe we'll be talking from, a relationship at that point and being like, okay, we'll become dating coaches for that. So, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, look, thank you everyone for participating in this as well. And like I said at the beginning of this live, I will be accepting letters again from the end of next week. And I see someone here's asked, will you please post a link to your colleague/friend? I absolutely will. You're very easy to link because your name's very easy to remember with this, so it's good. I love it when people's names are their handles. It makes things very easy. All right, Tawny.
I love the Ken Reed, and it's Ken Reed. It's kind of like Tawny Loveless, and people are like, is that your real last name? I'm like, it is. And yeah,
well,
it all goes together.
It's funny because the podcast name's that last name's not my last name, but with this, it was just a very punny thing that someone came up with, and I'm like, I'm running with that.
Yeah, you had to. That's too perfect. When I read that, I was like, I saw it, and I was like, oh, this is perfect for you.
I agree. No, I thought it was very cute. All right, thank you everyone for participating. Tawny, it was great seeing you again, and have a wonderful evening with your kids. And everyone, I will be back next week for another podcast or live doing the last remaining letters for the September batch. All right. Goodbye, everyone.